sitting in front of your cameras, because this is all good. So I'm going to go through it again. We are thrilled to have Troy Love. He was here last month sharing on a portion of this topic, but it was like, you've got to come back and do more. And I just really value his work. He's a contributor on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. In the Rooms and Seeking Integrity have collaborated for these Super Saturday Recovery Summits. This is our fifth in the series. And I'm pleased to be able to host this. And everybody keeps saying, you should introduce yourself. I'm Tammy, and I am an alcoholic and lots of other addict things, but that's the one that's the easiest to identify. So I'm a grateful person in recovery. Recovery has given me everything. Somebody the other day said, you sound like a cheerleader. And I said, I'm a cheerleader for recovery. I don't care how you get it, where you get it. If the Seeking Integrity treatment program is right, great, but get recovery. It has changed everything in my life. And, I invite you all to, continue journey. Glad you're here. So Troy's presentation is just above the box, Finding Peace from Shame. Download it if you are able to do so. Please do not request to share. I'm going to hit X. It's nothing personal, but I'm going to hit X and keep you out of that. This is being recorded so that people can find it or review it again, at a later time. So without further ado, Troy Love, author of Finding Peace from Shame, is going to present, and I'm going to toggle my audio off so there's no disruptions. So thank you, Troy, for being here.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people here with us today, and I just wish you well in your recovery process, whatever that looks like for you. If you attended last time, I shared some of the model of the Finding Peace model. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that this time, but this is the core of the work that really takes place when I start working with someone to try and help them get back to that inner circle where we have the yin and yang of pain and peace. And one of the things that really hijacks our ability to be able to be in that place of peace and recognize that we matter, that we have value, that we're important, is shame. And shame is a universal emotion. Brene Brown calls it the master emotion. Shame is defined as the deep and abiding belief and emotion and experience that I'm flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And Brene also teaches that everybody has shame. The only people in the world who don't have shame are sociopaths. So you either can admit that you're a sociopath or you can admit that you have shame. It's one of the two. I think I'll go with the shame. And it's something that happens to every one of us. And we end up shaming each other. We end up trying to convince other people that they're not enough. So just as you think about it for a moment, I want you to see if you can think back in your life to one of the earliest memories that you have where you had the message that there was something wrong with you or you did something wrong, and that feeling of shame. For me, it's not one of my earliest, but it is a very early memory for me, and it's a really silly one. I was in the first grade, and I honestly don't remember my first grade teacher's name. I remember all of my other elementary school teachers, but I don't remember her. And I think that's interesting because of this experience. And it's a very minor one. We were learning how to write the letter N. And I thought it was fantastic to show her how not to write the letter N. And so I wrote it like I wrote on the back of a paper and big old messy N that kind of looked like an H a little bit, and it was all skiwampus and whatever. And I went up to my teacher and I said, "This is how you're not supposed to write the letter N." And she looked at me and she's like, "Yeah, yeah, that's right. Go back to your seat, please." She didn't even say anything mean. She didn't do anything inappropriate as from a teacher perspective, but that look on her face and the lack of joy or excitement for what I thought that I had done was boom. And I went back to my seat and I thought, oh, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have showed her that then. That was dumb. And it's interesting. I'm 46 years old now, and that is the only memory I have from first grade. Other than that, and I remember going to a friend's house and we were watching we didn't even have VHS back then. I don't know. We were watching a movie. I don't know how we were watching it. And I found a pebble on the ground and I shoved it up my nose and I couldn't get it out for like 3 more days. Those are the only 2 memories I got from first grade. But it's, to me, that's the power of shame, is that it's there, and the message immediately, without her even having to say anything, was, hey, there's something wrong, you did it wrong. And that shame then can cloud over our sense of peace. It can tell us not to share our emotions. It can tell us lies and then keep us from being able to move forward in how we're progressing and towards our recovery. And as you look at your journey through addiction and recovery, how much has shame been a part of that? The truth is that we can't ever really get rid of shame. It is a master emotion, but we can learn how to become resilient to it. We can learn how to interact with it in a different way. I was talking to a man who's a martial arts instructor, and we were talking about how we have some parts of ourselves that, as much as we pray it away or want it to go away, it's just not going to go away. And there's some part of accepting that. And he was saying, like, as an addict, you may always be tempted to do your drug of choice. You may, but as a martial arts instructor, I want to teach my students how to be able to deal with that oncoming stuff and maneuver away from it, how to get out of that situation, how to be able to stand with power and joy that you were able to get out of the situation. And that's how I also look at shame, is like, we can let shame hijack our life. I use the analogy oftentimes that you're like in the WWF wrestling rink, and you have shame who's coming at you. But if you can learn how to be able to manage it, walk through it, figure out what it's really there for, then you're able to walk away with your big old belt on your stomach that you won because you were able to master shame. So that today we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I was introduced to this concept by a man named Gary Van Warmerdam. He's a life coach, and I found him as I was trying to figure out how to love myself more. And he had an online course, and I took it. And he introduced in his course this concept, and I've tweaked it a little bit to fit for me, but I'm really grateful for his introduction to what I now call the shadows of shame. And how I deal with the shadows of shame, what makes it a little easier for me is I turn them into characters or archetypes or personas. And I'm going to describe what they are in just a second. But as I do that, it's almost like a Gestalt kind of a therapy, an empty chair kind of therapy exercise, where I'm actually having conversations with these different shame components. And as I do, I'm able to get more strength, information, understanding about what's actually going on. And then I have the ability to be able to maneuver through that shame and stand in a place of groundedness. So there are 6 shadows of shame, and I've broken them down into different ways of understanding them. So the first one is measurement. So it's the appraisal measurement. And shame convinces us that there's something wrong with us. And so if you think about this as a spectrum, we have the spectrum and the appraisal spectrum. On one hand, we really want to be able to be seen as important, valuable, that we've been assessed as having value. And on the other side of the spectrum, it has no value. So if you just think about like an appraisal, like your house is being appraised, for example, we're looking at where along that measuring stick does your house fit, or you took the SATs back in the day when they actually did those, and you figure out where you stand in there. It's an appraisal. So on one side of the spectrum, the shadow of shame that is there is the judge, and that's usually the one that I introduce the first, because for most people it's the loudest, or it's the one that they can recognize the most easily at the beginning. And the judge is the voice inside that tells you that you are not measuring up, that you are flawed, you've made mistakes, that you are not perfect, that here's the standard of where you're supposed to be, and here's where you are. And so there's a gap between where you're supposed to be and where you are. And the judge will point out to you why you then are bad and horrible and no good and all that, because you're not up here. The challenge with that is that the judge is always moving the target around. So you could say, the judge should say, well, you will only be enough if you become the CEO of your organization, for example. And so you work really hard and you get to the top of that. And then the judge says, well, but really you are only going to be enough if you're the CEO of that organization over there, because you're still not enough. So it always moves, which is really, really frustrating for us when we're trying to work on recovery. And the judge is like, well, you should have had 60 days sober. You only have 40 days sober. When you get to 60 days sober, then you'll be good. You get to 60 days sober. Well, look at that person. That person has like 10 years sobriety. There's something wrong with you. So there's always comparison that's going on with the judge, and it's always appraising your value and telling you that you're not enough. So that's the judge. If you took a moment and just closed your eyes and listened to that inner critic, that voice that's telling you how you're not paying attention, that you're not trying hard enough, that you're not enough, see if you can identify who it sounds like, how loud it is, what the quality of the voice sounds like, and then just see if you can recognize how often that voice, that judge is there for you. And usually when we introduce this to people, they're like, wow, that judge is like all the time, never shuts up, really loud and obnoxious. I say, yep. We're going to talk about how to deal with that in a minute. On the other side of that spectrum, though, is the royal. And the royal tells you that you're better than everyone else, that you deserve, that you're entitled. Doesn't everybody see your value? Don't they see how important you are? Don't they see that you bring so much to the table? And so it's almost the opposite of the judge. And people will say, well, why is that a shadow of shame? The role of shame is to disconnect us, to make us apart from, to make us feel like we are not enough so that we can connect. So it's a shadow of shame because it does the exact same thing as the judge, just the other way. If the royal's in charge and is telling you that you're better than everybody else and you deserve and you're entitled, well, that is just as disconnecting for the people around you as when the judge is telling you that you're worse than everybody else, that you don't measure up. So it's the opposite sides of the spectrum. When I introduce the royal, a lot of times people say, I don't think I have one of those. I'm like, well, you do, but the royal sometimes doesn't come out as often. It comes out in situations where maybe you feel taken advantage of, or I use the example of somebody cutting you off in traffic and all of a sudden you're really mad because you almost got in a car accident and you yell at them and don't you see me? That's the royal who's saying, I'm better than. So in the middle is, I matter like you matter. I have value. I'm not perfect, but either are you. I have flaws and defects just like you, and I'm working on them. but I know that I still have value. And that's where we want to be able to be, is in the middle of that. But on either side of the spectrum, the judge or the royal can hijack that. And when they're there, man, it's not going to work out. So you just think about, if you're trying to have a connection with your loved one, for example, if your royal is out and telling you you're better than, and you deserve, and you should be entitled, and why aren't they listening to you, that can be just as damaging as the judge saying, well, you suck, you're horrible, you're no good, like, I don't know what's wrong with you. So hopefully you can understand how that spectrum works. The next spectrum is image. It's all about how we are seen, how people view us. So the last one was how we are appraised, our value inside. But this spectrum is all about how we are seen by others. And so on one side of the spectrum, we have what I call the politician. And if you think right now, at least in the United States, it's the political season is starting to come up, and what is happening? Well, all the politicians want you to vote for them, and they don't want you to vote for the other person. That's the same kind of energy that the politician has for you. The politician wants you to be seen as good enough so that people will like you, appreciate you, value you, accept you. And so the politician will say, you can't let anyone see your flaws. You can't let anyone know that you're imperfect. You can't let anyone see that you have made mistakes. You got to put on a mask and pretend that everything is great so that people will like you. So the politician is, don't let anyone see what's going on. Don't let them see that you're sweating. Make sure you look poised and everything is going on. I think that's the beauty of the 12-step rooms, is that in those moments we walk in and we say, hello, I'm Troy, I'm a sex addict, or I'm so and so, and I'm an alcoholic, and we take the mask off. And the weirdest thing happens, that at the end of the meeting, people will say, can I have your phone number? Can I talk to you? It's the weirdest thing that doesn't make any sense to the politician. The politician says that shouldn't be the way it is. Everybody needs to think that you are perfect. So the politician and the judge work really well together as they're tag team wrestling you onto the mat, where the judge is saying, yeah, you're flawed and defective. And the politician says, but don't let anyone know. Don't tell. It's going to be bad if they ever find out. On the other side of the spectrum is the martyr. And the martyr tells you that your needs don't matter, that doesn't really matter what you need or what you want. As long as you are making everybody else happy, that's wonderful. So you're going to take care of everybody else and don't take care of yourself. And the martyr also says, and we want people to notice that that's what you're doing. We want people to notice just how much of a sacrifice you're making to help everybody else out. So it's all about the image. Politician, don't let anybody see that you're flawed and defective. The martyr, let everyone know that you are going out of your way to sacrifice yourself for the better good. As you think about how those two can really hijack your ability to have integrity, to be able to show up, to have boundaries, to say no, those two can really hijack that. The politician's like, don't say no, because people won't like you. The martyr says, don't say no, because you're not worthy of it. You don't matter. As long as they're happy, then you're good to go. So if you have questions, we can address that as we go on, but that's the spectrum on that. I need to be seen as on one side, and I need to be seen as perfect on one side, and I need to be seen as the one who's self-giving, just sacrificing myself for the better good on the other end. And the third spectrum is about power, how I'm going to be able to have the ability to influence my life. And so on one side of this spectrum, we have the impotent one. And the impotent one says you don't have any power. There's nothing you can do. you're always going to be like this. Life is always going to suck. That you're going to have it's going to be horrible. You just need to accept that you have absolutely no power. There's nothing you can do about it. And just realize that life is going to be miserable for you. So the words that the impotent one uses include always and never. It's always going to be like this, or it's never going to change. The impotent one uses the word can't a lot. You can't do that. It's not going to work out well for you. So as you think about when you're working on recovery, and maybe you're tempted to use your drug of choice or your behavior of choice, the impotent one will say, "Oh, you can't say no. You can't. Doesn't matter if you go to it doesn't matter if you reach out to someone. Probably no one's going to answer the phone if you call them anyway. It doesn't matter if you go to a 12-step meeting, because probably not going to get anything out of it anyway." Kind of, that's the impotent one. Just like doesn't matter. Like just accept that it's going to be that way. On the other side is the rebel. And the rebel says, you have a ton of power. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to answer to anybody. You can choose to do however, you can take the world by storm. You can do whatever you want. And it doesn't matter if it's going to hurt somebody else. It doesn't matter if there are consequences for your choices. Those don't matter. As long as it makes you happy, as long as it makes you feel powerful, as long as it's soothing the pain that you've got going on, as long as it's all about you, then you can do whatever you want. And so that rebel is often the voice that gets us to then engage in our behaviors of choice or our drugs of choice. In that moment, everything else kind of goes blank, and the rebel is just like, just do it. You should just do it. Doesn't matter. Like, you go for it. So the rebel is that voice that just tells you to ignore your value system, tells you to ignore the length of sobriety, tells you to ignore that your choices may have an impact on other people. So that's that spectrum, and it's all about power. As we look at those, so the impotent one says you can't, rebel says you can do whatever you want. So when they show up, and they always show up because here's the deal. So when they show up, you ask this question: why are you here? In the beginning, when I was doing this, my message was, well, you just need to tell them to go away. So the judge would show up and beat me up and say, hey, you're not doing well. And I'd say, you know what, just go away. I don't want to listen to you. One of my therapists gave me the idea of saying, go eat some ice cream, go enjoy yourself somewhere else. And I got to be honest, it does work. Like, for a moment, it is effective. So if all else fails and you just can't feel like you can get rid of the shadows, then send them away. Go tell them to eat ice cream or your favorite food or whatever. Tell them to go away. And they will. They always come back. And they always come back regardless of whether you send them away or not. So one of the questions that you ask them when they show up is, why are you here? And that's the beauty of this part of the work that I teach people about, is that I literally imagine that I have the judge sitting in the chair across from me, or sitting as I'm driving down the road, in the passenger seat. And for me, I've been able to imagine, I've even drawn what each of these shadows look like. It's a wonderful experience to be able to do, because it helps me in my imagination be able to see what I'm dealing with. And for me, my judge is an 8-year-old little boy who's drowning in a judge's robe and has his gavel and is very, very bossy. And so I'm hearing the judge telling me, well, I'm not measuring up, and I can't believe that you did that, and why did you do it that way? As I close my eyes and I see that it really is this little 8-year-old boy who's being really bossy, immediately a lot of the energy that just was overwhelming me goes away, because I'm recognizing, why would I listen to an 8-year-old little boy who's trying to tell me how to run my life? Um, 8-year-old little boys are awesome and they have a lot of energy, but I don't think I would go to my 8-year-old boy and say, hey, tell me how I'm supposed to run my business, or tell me how I'm supposed to interact with my significant other, or tell me what I'm supposed to do with my fourth step or whatever. Probably not going to turn to them. So that helps me. Other people's judges look different for them, and that's fine. But just having that image in your mind. So then I ask the shadow, why are you here? And oftentimes there will be silence when you ask that, because no one's ever asked the shadows those questions before. You ask the rebel, why are you here? And the rebel will say, well, because you need this. Like, this is really important for you. Like, you need this. It's going to help you. Oh, okay. So you're trying to help me. Or I'll ask the royal, why are you here? Well, because don't they see how much you matter? Oh, you're trying to help me remember that I have some worth. So I'm starting to ask them these questions, and they're going to give you an answer. There might be a little pause, and then they're going to give you an answer. And the answer is always that they're trying to help you. Now, they probably should be fired for their jobs because they don't actually help you. As long as you listen to them, your life will be a mess. If you always are doing what the politician says and the rebel says and trying to make the judge happy, your life is going to be a mess. Your relationships are going to be awful. So I wouldn't recommend that you listen to what they have to say, but I want you to pay attention to what they have to say and ask the question, why are you here? And I'll give you the answer. The bottom line is they don't want you to feel pain. They don't want you to hurt anymore. So the judge knows what rejection feels like and knows how painful that is for you. And so the judge believes, well, if you're perfect, no one will reject you. No one will abandon you. Nobody will betray you if you're perfect. The politician says, I don't want you to be betrayed. I don't want you to be hurt. So let's just put on a mask. And if everybody thinks that you're amazing, then no bad things will happen to you. The royal thinks, well, you're worthy of so much more. Don't they recognize your value? I don't like it when people reject you. So they just don't matter. And so you hear how each one of them is actually trying to help you avoid the attachment wounds of loss, rejection, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, and abuse. So when you figure that out and you listen to them, you're like, oh, you're trying to help me. Then you say, well, thank you. Thank you for trying to help me. I really appreciate it. I can see that you are actually trying to help me find a way to get one of my needs met. And if I listen to you, I'm not going to work out that well. I'm not going to get my needs met in a very healthy way. So thank you. I'm not really going to listen to you. I appreciate what you have to say. But I am grateful that you're trying to remind me deep down that you're trying to help me not feel pain. So now let me try to find a way to get these needs met in a healthier way. And when we start to do that, then we're able to do the wound care necessary to help us as we go forward. If you look at those wounds of loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse, if you look at what's the opposite of those give you a signal to what you actually really need. The shadows are just trying to help you not feel pain. But you are a person who's worthy of love and belonging. You have value. You have purpose. There's a reason why you're here in the universe. And if you can connect with that, and then I recognize, well, my neglect wound is really stirred up right now. What do I need? I actually need someone to pay attention to me. How can I do that? I could go to a meeting. I could call my sponsor. I could reach out to one of my friends. I could turn to my significant other and say, hey, can we spend some time together? I can find a way to get that need met that is healthy. If I notice that my judge is out and beating me up, and I say, well, why are you here? And the judge is like, well, because, your friend just stopped talking to you and is really mad at you right now. Well, what wound is that? Well, that's abandonment or betrayal. And what do I need right now? Well, I need comfort. I need love. I need someone to say that I still matter, that I have value. Okay, how are you going to get that? Well, I can go to a meeting. I can reach out to my sponsor. I can call a friend. I can journal. I can turn to my higher power. There's so many different things that we can do. But if I can connect with the need and find a way to start getting that need met and doing that mindfully and with purpose, something magical happens. And the thing that magically happens is that the shadows shut up. They stop talking. Why? Because you're not hurting anymore. You've been able to do some wound care, and you've been able to soothe that pain for a little while. We live in a world where it's going to get hit again. It's part of life, but you can soothe that pain. You can learn strategies of how to deal with it. And the moment you do, the judge or the impotent one or whoever, they back up. They're like, oh, you're good. You're good. I'm really proud of you. I'm glad that you got your needs met. I'll come back later. And they go back into the locker room until the next time we have a wrestling match. So what we want to be able to do is tap into the wisdom and compassion that we have inside of us to be able to identify the truth. And that's the part I want to end with. There's in dialectical behavioral therapy, it's called DBT. Marsha Linehan talks about wise mind. And wise mind is there's a logical mind, and then there's emotional mind. And then when you put them together, like there's a little sliver, and that's wise mind. And wise mind is actually a state of being. It's I've tried to find like articles and stuff to explain it, but it's actually just a felt sense that you have inside of yourself where you feel grounded and you feel peaceful and you feel guided by either by your higher power or by an inner light. And so as you're sitting and listening to all the shadows hijacking you, you close your eyes and you try to connect with that wise mind place. You breathe and you just close your eyes and you think, okay, when have I felt grounded? When have I felt loved? When have I felt like the things that I do make a contribution to the universe? And if you can get yourself into that place and find it, it's a little challenging to find it the first time. You might need a little bit of help, but once you can find it, then you know where it is, and then you can close your eyes and just breathe and go back there. And you're sitting there, and then you recognize the judge is saying, hey, you're not trying hard enough. I sit with my wisdom. I sit with this wise mind part of me, and I'm like, I see what's going on here. I'm going to be able to take care of what needs to happen. I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't hurt anybody else, but also honors me and my value. And I then can connect with the truth that I do matter, that I have worth, that I have meaning and purpose. And as I do that, the pain starts to diminish and I get into this place of peace. And when we're in that place, we are more apt to make good decisions that not only improve our lives, but the lives of our loved ones and the people around us, because we're doing it from a place of integrity, a place of peace, a place of wisdom, rather from one of those shadows that is hijacking our lives and can make a mess of things. So hopefully that was helpful. I'd love to be able to answer any questions that you have.
We have
Anything come up?
questions.
Great.
Yes. Yeah. So the first one, this one is, what's wrong in wanting to be perfect? I mean, we want to buy perfect shoes. Nobody buys stained shoes or stained clothes.
Beautiful. There isn't anything wrong with wanting to have quality. There's not anything wrong with wanting, like if you were going to go buy a new car, You wouldn't want to go buy a car that the engine doesn't work well, or there's a big old scratch on the side, especially if you're going to be paying thousands and thousands of dollars for it. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to have quality and integrity and all of that. And if you want to buy some beautiful shoes, buy the beautiful shoes. And of course, you're not going to spend money on something where there's like a big flaw on it. So it's not that there's nothing wrong with wanting to have that. What the judge says, though, is that because you are not perfect, there's something wrong with you. So we use the analogy a lot of times with people who are struggling with weight. And so the judge will say, well, you will be perfect when you have this percent body fat or you weigh this much. There's nothing wrong with wanting to take care of our body and be healthy and eat right and exercise. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem that really sets us apart is that you can't be happy until you're not okay, until you are flawed and defective, all of that, until you get there. And 99.9% of the time after you get there, you still don't feel like you're worthy of love and belonging. So it's not the message of perfection that's bad. It's the message that you're not worthy of love and belonging because you haven't met the standard that is harmful.
Well, and I love shoes. And so I was thinking, yes, I love lovely shoes. I just got some new running shoes because during COVID, all I've been able to do is run. So I've run more. But you know what? I put my new running shoes on and they aren't as comfortable yet because they aren't broken into. They'll be broken into after a few more runs and then they won't look perfect. They're going to have dust from the trail. They're going to have little, I live in Arizona too. They're going to have little the little cactus prickers in them. And you know what? And then they're going to be more comfortable and but they're not going to look perfect. And so to your point too, it's like having things that look nice. And I appreciate that. I do want to buy things that are nice and everything. But once they get here and lived in, they don't, the sheen is gone and all of that type of thing. I maintain, I take good care of that. But striving for perfection and boy, your eating disorder, I mean, I was like, ding, 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 ding. I'm a multi-winner. One of my issues was an eating disorder. And, and I always, and here's the thing, the always and nevers. I was cracking up with the impotent one. As soon as I'm doing always and nevers, I understand that I'm in not a good space. But my challenge was, it's easy for me to think if the scale says a certain number, then then everything's going to be wow and wonderful, and that's so not true. I mean, like, I don't want to be defined by a number on a scale. But also, just like the judge, it changes because, like, well, if you got to that number, well, then 5 more pounds would be better. I mean, it's so dissatisfying too, and externalized rather than the intrinsic value that you were talking about with, being the wise mind of just going, I have worth regardless of what the scale says. I want to be healthy. I want to take care of myself. But, if I'm always examining my physical body for perfection, it never was, and B, at this age it for sure isn't going to be. And then I'm always going to be dissatisfied. So that's really challenging. So next question, Troy. I'm dating someone. This is a great interaction for these. I'm dating someone who is like the politician and the rebel. Should I just run in the other direction? I'm playing out things on the other side of the spectrum. I really like him, but should I be trying to date someone I want to change? It makes me feel like I'm his mother.
So because I don't know you and I don't know this situation, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. You are seeing some red flags and you are seeing some warning signs. The truth is, all of us have these shadows that can hijack our lives. And until I started to really pay attention to them, I behaved badly. I treated my significant other badly. I didn't show up the way I wanted to as a father. And if anybody had tried to change me at that point, I probably would have been resistant. My rebel and my royal probably would have shown up. Like, how dare you try to tell me what I should do and shouldn't do? Those two would have shown up a lot for me. So part of that is paying attention to the effect that it has on you and noticing whether any shadows of shame show up for you. For example, if the martyr says, well, yeah, it's your job, his needs matter more than yours, and so you don't really matter, so just make sure that he's happy and do everything he wants, and then you'll be solid. Paying attention to that martyr and thinking, if I continue to listen to you, that's probably not going to work well. Notice whether your royal or your rebel comes out and says, I don't deserve this. And then sitting with that place of wisdom for you and thinking, okay, where do I see this going? If we are not able to make some changes with our lives, where do I see this going? Is there anything I can do to try and help us come closer together? And if there's not, then maybe I'll make some decisions that are healthy for me and healthy for them. The key to helping you with how to make that decision is connecting with your value and your worth. We talk about boundaries a lot, which are important. But if you don't connect that you have value and that you have worth, your boundaries aren't going to mean a whole lot. They'll just be words that you say. But when you can connect with that you matter and that you're important, you will make choices that are in the best interest of you and your loved ones.
Well, and I was thinking too, if this person that they're dating doesn't know, it's like, we're just bouncing around. We're living in one of the six that because we're trying to be safe, but learning about it and then being able to have the conversation of like, okay, what I feel like is, I'm seeing your politician and I would rather see the wise mind. And is there something that you'd be willing to be vulnerable with me so that we can look at it and I don't have to turn to the others, to the martyr, so it feels to me like there's an opportunity to at least explore,
Yeah, absolutely.
that. So
I'm
next,
guessing that underneath that is fear.
yes. Well, if all of these are just trying to keep us safe,
Right.
yeah, there's fear pushing away, doing whatever. So next question, my husband's family did not say happy birthday to me when it was my birthday, but my husband gave me flowers and tried to act like everything was normal, but it's not. My relationship is very bad for me. How should I react and how to do wound care? If you have any tools for me to try, thank you. So,
Thank you. Okay, so the question is, which shadows showed up for you when they didn't do that? Because the wound was probably rejection or neglect. I'm guessing that was the wound. Nobody's paying attention to me, or they literally are telling me that I'm not enough. I'm guessing that's the wound was one of those two. And so now that's painful, right? So then which shadows showed up for you? Did the judge show up and tell you, well, it's because you just aren't a good enough person. That's why they don't even like you. Did the royal show up and say, how dare they not recognize you for your birthday? Did the martyr say, well, it's okay that they didn't recognize your birthday because they probably were doing other things that are more important and you just don't matter anyway? Like, who showed up? So that's the first part, figuring out who showed up and then asking them why they're there. And underneath that is a need. I'm guessing that you needed to be recognized, that your birthday is an important day. It's the day you came into the world. And so then you sit with that and say, okay, how can I get that need met in a way that's healthy? Can I have a conversation with my spouse? Am I asking for something that these people don't have the ability to actually do very well? Is there something that's going on with our relationship that maybe we can address? And you come from a place of wisdom rather than letting the shadows hijack you. It's probably going to go a lot better. You have to recognize they have their own shadows too, so you don't have any control over that. But being able to connect with your wisdom that you matter and then figuring out, well, what do I need? And in the end, it may be, I needed someone to recognize me. It wasn't probably them. I just needed recognition. So I'm going to find another way to get that need met. So the wound care is, how do I soothe the pain in a way that's healthy, and how do I get that need met in a way that's healthy?
So happy birthday from me to you
Yeah.
on this too. So okay, so the next question. I have noticed I'm trying to strive for material success and getting things in house, car, etc. Then I'll be okay. You said something about if you're feeling neglected, you need attention. I find that I'm having these attention seeking behaviors that start to come out because of this feeling of neediness and wanting attention, but I do not want to act on them because well, they are attention seeking behaviors, but now I'm left with a void of how to meet my attention needs. Can you talk on this or elaborate on what you said? The getting outside things somehow feels like it would make me feel okay, but somehow it's tied to not getting the attention I needed or needing the attention. Make sense?
It does make sense.
Yes, I thought so.
Okay, so the wound is neglect. Something we talked about last time that we didn't spend a whole lot of time is that when the wound gets hit, there's a negative core belief that automatically gets activated throughout your body in your nervous system. And there's three genres of them. The first is, there's something wrong with me. I am not enough. I'm flawed. I'm defective. The second is about safety or trust. I can't trust others, or I can't depend on other people to show up for me. And the third is a sense of powerlessness. There's nothing I can do. So when you notice that the materialism is what you're drawn to do, what I want you to be able to pay attention to is, well, do I believe that I'm enough inherently? Do I believe that I matter and that I have worth, even if I didn't have any of this stuff? Am I trying to do this as a way of self-soothing? Am I trying to buy this stuff in order to have the politician win and prove to the world that I have all this stuff and therefore I'm enough? If that's what's going on, what we want to be able to tackle is the negative core belief and help you change that, to help you rewrite that. And I'm enough, even if I don't have any of all this stuff. I may want it, and that's fine. You can want that. But is it driven by that negative core belief? And if you can figure out what that is, that's absolutely tied to that neglect or rejection wound. Then we say, well, is there healthier ways that I can remind myself that I'm enough without maxing out my credit card or buying a bunch of stuff? Is there other ways that I can do it? It's not that stuff you don't want it or whatever, but is there a way for me to remind myself that I am enough? And the interesting thing is that when we start to rewrite that message that's been tattooed on our nervous system, tattooed on our heart, our compulsion to use the numbing tools diminishes, and we become more content with what we have. So there's a lot of work that we could do around that to help shift that belief system.
So next question. Thank you so much for your presentation. How do I learn to validate myself so I don't become dependent upon external validation? Doesn't healthy self-love only come from the self?
I love that question. That is a question that I think a lot about. So there's two parts of it. If you think about a gas tank in your vehicle, you always need to stop at the gas station and fill it up again. So the tank is usually always being used up, and that's the same with our love and belonging tank. So our love and belonging tank sometimes is pretty empty. We run on E a lot for a lot of us, and there's some people that is full a lot. So when it starts to go down, just like when your vehicle is out of fuel, you got to go stop and get it filled up. So there are lots of different ways that you can do that. And some of those involve reaching out to others, which with COVID is like really hard to do. Reaching out to others, finding ways to be able to let them love on you. The other part is to do things that bring you joy. And so doing meditations of self-love, practicing radical self-acceptance, those kind of things that you can do that can help you feel that up. The key is that if you went to the gas station and you were going to fill up your car with gas, but you didn't take the gas cap off, you just like put your credit card in, started pumping gas would go all over the ground, It wouldn't go in the tank. Shame is the gas cap. If you don't believe that you are worthy of love and belonging, and you don't screw that cap off, then no matter what is done, you don't let it in. And so that's part of challenging the shadows of shame, so that you can take it off and say, I actually believe that I am worthy of doing some self-soothing. I'm worthy of maybe going and getting massage, or I'm worthy of having getting a pedicure. I'm worthy of going and eating something that brings me joy, not to numb, but because I'm worthy of those kind of things. I can screw the gas cap off. I can actually love on myself, and it actually goes in more than I don't believe it. I don't believe it, so I can't internalize it. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's a combination of both. Not to become dependent on everyone else filling my needs, but knowing that connection is vitally important to our recovery, and also figuring out how can I do some of this myself.
So, well, I'm going to ask the next question, but I have a thought on this too. So, the next question is, what are some healthy and effective ways to ask for attention when I recognize that it is a need that is not being met? So, what are ways I can ask for it in a healthy way?
I will share with you how me and my buddy Matt do that. Matt will call me and he will say, I have had the worst day ever. I'm on my way home. I'm going to be going home to my kids and my wife. And it's just been a really, really hard day. And can you just tell me that you think that I'm a good man? Can you tell me that I'm a good therapist? Can you tell me that I'm a good dad? Because, man, my rejection wound just got really slapped all over the place today. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I know what that feels like. And I want you to know how much I love you and I appreciate you and how much you matter in my life. And I'm grateful for you. And vice versa. I can say, man, I'm struggling. My neglect wound is really raw today. I'm craving some attention, craving that, and I don't really know where I'm going to go to be able to get it. And he'll talk with me and he'll validate it, and then we'll brainstorm some ways for me to go get that need met. He lives 300 miles away from me, so I don't get it from him, but we talk through it. And we use the language, like we use the attachment wound language, so it's something we know. And you can do the same. And if you the key part is hoping that the other person can see your pain. Nick Tak-Han did a wonderful interview with Oprah, and you can go look for him on her Super Sunday, and there's like a 4-minute YouTube video, and that's the 4 mantras. And darling, I see you. Darling, I know you're there. Darling, I suffer. Darling, I see you suffering. I'm here for you. And that's really the key for this is, darling, best friend, honey, I'm suffering, I'm hurting right now, and the other person can see it and acknowledge it and say, I'm here for you. Being able to use language to do that is really a vital part. And you can just use the words I'm teaching you. Hey, my rejection wound got bumped today and it's really painful. And I just need someone to tell me that they love me.
So my thought between these two questions was having a plan when you're not in the need. Because for me, when I'm in the need, I might be just more likely to be looking everywhere for, so having a plan, having the conversation with your friend Matt, going, there are some times, and is it going to be okay if we do that, but having, when it's not in the energy moment or in the depleted moment or whatever, to me, I was like, I've got my little go-to list of this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try. I've got a list of 10 things. I'm going to keep trying until one of those helps. Might be the next things. Okay, so the next question is, how do I manage all the mixed up difficulties that come from my business partner being passive about doing anything with work, or being passive aggressive or accusing when I ask a question as to what things are happening with our work, or when I ask for a need such as being kept in the loop on communications? I find it hard that these requests are always deflected by being ignored or excused with accusations. I feel overwhelmed by what to do or how to say things. I have offered to help. Um, I have I have offered them help too. Nothing seems to make it better, and I feel overwhelmed and responsible for doing everything. Thank you.
Okay, so as I hear that, I'm curious what shadows are coming out for you. How many of the shadows is the impotent one out saying that there's nothing you can do? You've tried so hard and it just doesn't matter. Is the um, royal maybe coming out a little bit and saying, he's not recognizing your needs? Just paying attention to the shadows is part of that. The bottom line is that there is some woundedness taking place in the relationship. It could be neglect, it could be betrayal, it could be some rejection. And being able to talk about that is with your business partner, being able to talk about the effect that the behavior is having on the relationship. And maybe you've done that, I don't know, but being able to talk about when these things happen, this is how it impacts my ability to be able to show up and support you, and vice versa. And really talking more not about the behaviors that are going on, but the underlying pain that is taking place in the relationship between the two of you, and what your greatest fear is, or the deepest story that you're telling yourself about what will happen in the future. And hopefully the person will care about you enough to be able to listen, and you'll be able to listen to them, and open up what that person is scared about, what wounds are coming up for them in the business, what are they really worried about, and hopefully being able to come to a place of understanding. There's a really good book that has nothing to do with the shadows, but there's a really good book called Crucial Conversations that talks about how to have these kind of business conversations in a way that is open. And so you may want to go check that out. Crucial Conversations by Joseph Grenny, and there's like 4 authors. And what they do is talk about, it's like how to have couples therapy at work. So it's pretty helpful.
We are out of time. Thank you all. Great questions. Troy, as always, thank you for sharing all of this. It's so important and so impactful, and it can really help us work on our wounds, but also show up for other people as well, change our relationships. So for those of you joining, we'll be back in an hour. Jamie Marich will be on talking about addiction as dissociation. If you didn't already download the Finding Peace from Shame, it's at the top of your screen, and you can download that information, and you can find Troy Love Finding Peace book on Amazon, but also he's got a website. You can reach out to him and connect, right?
Yes, at troyllove.com.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
It was wonderful. Have a wonderful day.